Good afternoon and welcome to June's webinar, which is Governance and Leadership, How Active Leadership Can Drive Real Outcomes for Your RTO. I am Brooke Lombard, the Managing Director of RTO Works and Adasco Online, and I'm your host again today. I'm joined once again by Scott Templeton, our lead compliance consultant at RTO Works and former ASCO auditor, along with Sally Tansley, the founding force behind our business and head of our consulting team. So good afternoon, Scott and Sally. Thanks for joining us again.
Good afternoon, Brooke and everyone in the room. Great to be here.
Yeah, hello everybody. It's a bit cold here where I am. I hope it's warmer where you are.
I'm in Brisbane. It's actually quite chilly today.
Mm.
But yeah, a warm welcome to all of our RTO Works members and retainer clients. It's always lovely to have you with us, and we genuinely appreciate the opportunity to work alongside you each month. And a big welcome to everybody else joining us today, along with the wider community that we've built with these monthly webinars. We're really proud to offer these free of charge every month for the sector as a way to support the industry. So please share the details with your colleagues, share the link around, and encourage whoever can make it from your RTO to attend. Today's session will follow the usual format. It's 1 hour, around 45 minutes of discussion with Sally and Scott, followed by the 15-minute question and answer spot. But do feel free to pop comments in the chat as we go, because I will be monitoring the chat, and if something's relevant, I can answer that question at the right time for you. So we do record these webinars. The recording will go up on the website. I think Ben from customer service, he usually adds those the next day. So have a look for it there if someone in your organization missed it. You'll also get a certificate of attendance, which you can use in your PD register. And that's emailed to you after the webinar. But please be patient. It might only arrive tomorrow. So with the release of the standards in July 2025, we're coming up for a year now. Many
Unbelievable.
RTOs, yeah, next month's a year.
Mm.
Many
Mm.
RTOs have been shifting from what was previously seen as prescriptive compliance to an outcome-focused quality assurance. RTO governance, when done right, is the foundation to quality outcomes for both students and for the RTO itself. Quality Area 4, governance under the 2025 standards for RTOs, covers several themes which we'll unpack and discuss today, as well as ask the big questions that you as RTO leaders should be asking yourselves to drive real outcomes for your RTO. So Scott, we're going to start with you on the hot seat. What are the practical themes under Quality Standard 4 governance?
Thanks, Brooke. Okay, so under Quality Standard 4, the main themes, so to speak, they include leadership and accountability, roles, responsibilities and oversight, risk management, continuous improvement, self-assurance, integrity, fit and proper persons, and just overall compliance. So it's important, as well as, you and Sally just mentioned earlier, that under the 2025 standards, there has been a definite shift from the prescriptive compliance to a more outcome-focused assurance. So that's something that these new standards, 12 months in, has certainly been focused on.
Mm. And what would you say quality governance looks like under the new standards?
Yeah, so quality governance under the 2025 standards, it really is about active leadership. So it's not enough for an RTO just to say, we have a policy for that, or the compliance person looks after that. Leaders, they need to be able to demonstrate that they understand their obligations, that they're monitoring what's happening across the organization, and then they're actually making informed decisions, which are based on evidence. So no longer the days of just having, documents and set, pieces of evidence. They need to be across what's happening and then making decisions based on the outcomes of these activities and monitoring activities.
I like that.
I still remember when I think of that, Scott. I still remember that story that you told last time in our in one of the webinars about the CEO blowing the dust off the policies
Off
and
the
procedures.
briefcase.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I was
Yeah,
also just thinking as well, now that we're 12 months in, we probably need to stop saying the new standards.
yes, that's
Mm,
Just,
it.
they're fully
Yes.
our
fledged.
standards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're growing up.
So I like the phrase that you use, active leadership. I think that's a fantastic phrase that really drives home that point. Sally, having spent years or decades in the vet sector and witnessing many iterations of legislation, do you feel that this is a positive shift for RTOs?
Well, when we were planning for the webinar, we were talking about this and discussing it. And I mean, in some respects, yes, it is, but I feel like the outcome standards, I mean, they are, they're supposed to be broad, but they are very broad. And so, for example,
Yeah, because
I think like with fit and proper persons, that's very, it's in the outcome standards, that people have to, governing persons have to be fit and proper persons. And, that links to the thing about being suitable persons to oversee the operation of the organization. And that's kind of, fairly clear. And, I do see in reports that those things are picked up where there are issues around that. But I think the areas that are a little bit broad and we're not seeing a lot of focus on audits, for example, is things like, governing persons lead a culture of integrity, fairness, and transparency. I think so in some respects, yeah, it's a positive shift, but in others, it still feels a little bit, broad.
broad, yeah. I'd really like to open up a poll now to the audience. And please remember that this poll is anonymous. For any of you who do know the RTO Works team really well, we do like to rock the boat a little bit, ask the hard questions, and poke around in the difficult topics. So this is anonymous, and we will destroy the data afterwards. Do you think that the leadership team in your organization is active in the ongoing quality assurance of operations? Or do you feel that this function is largely outsourced to the RTO or compliance manager? So the options are I feel that leadership is coming from the top and the CEO is actively involved. I feel this is mostly left to the compliance manager or RTO manager, or I'm not answering that question. So we'll see the results come in, and yeah, that'll give us a little bit of an indication of how, whatever role you're in, you feel that your organization is doing. So we can see that 63%. Okay, so most people at this stage are feeling that leadership's coming from the top. That's fantastic. That's what we hope to see, and we also hope that more RTOs will follow this trend. Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it is left to the compliance manager. We're sitting on about 38% currently. So we'll just let that run, and then admin, if you can share the results with us when that's through, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So, Scott, while we wait for all of those results, what are you seeing as the most common mistakes that RTOs are making when trying to demonstrate governance under the standards?
Yeah, okay. So I would say having a lack of oversight on the day-to-day operations. So operating in silos, not having clear roles for your staff, and just as I said before, treating compliance as a bit of a paperwork exercise. So it's one thing to have various registers, such as, a risk register or continuous improvement register, but if they don't inform future practice, then they really are pointless to a degree. So you're really just having them for compliance sake. The whole purpose of this outcomes-based self-insurance, way of, operating for RTOs is making sure that the activities that you do inform the future practice and inform your organization. So seeing that we have 59% on that poll, I just saw it pop up there as well. That's making me sort of think that people are really starting to move towards this self-assurance way of operation as well. So that's good to know.
That's really positive. And Sally, is that similar? Sorry, Suzanne, Ben, I'm sure you're on it, but Suzanne says some of her colleagues are struggling to join. Yeah, we'll get that link for you, Susan. So Sally, is that similar to what you're seeing?
Yes, I mean, I think the size of the RTO is always a determinant because obviously if there's a very large RTO compared to a very small RTO, the role of the CEO is very different. So I think size
Yeah.
is an issue.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I find with smaller RTOs, the CEO can often be a bit of a gatekeeper of all information, and that can really cause blind spots to appear as the CEO is only looking through one set of eyes. And Sally, as you mentioned, large RTOs, they differ as well. So on the flip side, if they are quite a large RTO, the CEO might be overly reliant on their compliance manager or RTO compliance staff. And this does become a problem if that person is not performing their role effectively, or if there's a high turnover in that position as well. So there really
Mm.
needs to be a bit of a balance and have, everyone working in, I guess you could say, harmony. So there is, oversight and no blind spots occur.
Mm.
Got
So,
a question up there saying,
I am.
is it a requirement to have a compliance officer within an RTO? So I might just answer it at this
Mhm.
feel
point.
free.
So no, no. I mean, you can have whatever role suits the organizations. I guess the proviso there is that obviously, someone's got to have the compliance role. And
Mm.
we will talk about that later as well, that ideally compliance is just built into every role. But
Mm.
no, you definitely don't have to have a specific position. Often in a smaller RTO, you might get the CEO performing the role of the compliance manager, RTO manager, as well as the CEO.
Mm. And in
Yeah,
larger
and
organizations.
it's what works best for your RTO as well. So every RTO is different.
Mm.
I once said that RTOs are like snowflakes, like everyone's different and
Mm.
unique.
Or
So
fingerprint.
what might work for one RTO might not work for another. So it really is dependent on your own organization.
100% how that org charts worked out and how big the RTO is. An RTO might have several compliance officers because it might be so huge. So yeah,
Yeah.
good question though. So Scott, what you were saying before, this really demonstrates that senior leadership have to have those checks and balances in place when they're signing the annual declaration of compliance, as they are legally responsible. And if they've overly relied on their RTO or compliance manager, and this person hasn't performed their role satisfactorily, or there's been a huge turnover in that position, and the RTO manager like has, every 6 months or 9 months there's been a new one, that's a huge risk that you're opening yourself up to as a CEO. And that's why it's so crucial to make use of consultants in the industry, to make sure that you have someone with that broader oversight and that overview of how things are done in a number of different RTOs or settings, or a fresh set of eyes to come in at different points. And whether that's an internal audit, whether that's a routine check-in, an annual sort of activity, or it's more of an ongoing compliance retainer. There's different ways and shapes to go about that. But I definitely highlight that risk around the high turnover of staff, or potentially a person new to the role who might have stepped up to the role of compliance manager, and who is new to that position. Sally,
Yeah,
what do you think?
yeah. So yeah, I always recommend that to RTOs if they've had a change of staff or turnover in that role, it's good to bring a fresh set of eyes in because someone would be just doing things in their way, which they think's fine, and it might not be. Scott and I actually these days do spend a lot of our time helping our clients with compliance, and so we do for many clients we'll do a couple of days a month going in to those clients and looking at auditing certain areas and providing support so that those issues can be caught early. So that's really beneficial because then obviously that means that there's no impact on the quality of services delivered at, or what the regulator might find.
Mm.
Yeah.
And Scott, how can senior leaders show clear accountability for compliance with the standards simply beyond having that set of policies in place and having those registers and things in place?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So leaders show accountability when they can demonstrate that they're actively involved in the RTO's quality and compliance systems. So this means that they're not just approving policies once a year and assuming that everything is working. They're, stopping and asking the right questions. So they're reviewing the evidence, they're looking at feedback, they're making informed decisions and actually following up on actions. So, for example, they should be regularly looking at things like complaints and appeals, learner feedback, trainer capability, assessment validation outcomes. That's a real big one. Industry engagement, audit results, if you've had an audit activity, even if it is an internal audit, completion data and risk information. So the key point is, not just that you have the information, it's about what you're going to do with it. So a lot of RTOs out there, they do have various registers and they do collect information, they do seek feedback, but it's what you do with that information once you have it then. So
Mm.
you need to be active in your compliance and let it inform your future practice.
Yeah.
Yes, and just before we move on to the next bit, Ben just said something which I just thought was so good. He said in the comments, I think it's important to note that compliance is more than just a role, it's a culture. A culture of quality is much easier to
Mm.
manage than making it a person's role. Yes, it's
If
such a good
compliance is a
point.
role, then your
Mm.
organization's got a problem. It's got to be embedded at that whole cultural level, doesn't it?
It's
Yeah. Thanks.
interesting, isn't it, when you start to think about those words, compliance and quality as well.
Mm,
Is compliance like, is that a base level?
mm,
And qualities above that. I've always sort
mm.
of found all that terminology pretty interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of like rules and principles, isn't it? You don't,
Yes,
if you compliance it from my mind is like
yes,
rules and quality are like principles. So if we live our life according to principles rather than rules, we're going to do a better job of it.
yeah.
Similarly with our organization.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for sharing that, Ben. So, Scott, have you got like a bit of a working practice case study or something tangible that we can put all this together?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, demonstrating governance in practice is about being able to say, we identified this issue, we understood the risk, we've made a decision, we've allocated responsibility, we've implemented an action, and we've checked whether it worked. So, also, not every decision or improvement you make is going to work, but it's reviewing these processes and reviewing what the outcomes are so you can move on forward and improve the organization as a general. So good governance in practice creates a culture where the staff know their responsibilities, issues are escalated early, and continuous improvement is expected. A bit of a case study, because Brooke, I know you mentioned case study there. I told you I had like a bit of a case study type thing I'd talk to the group about today. So
Mm,
the scenario is that I've seen this many times in the past, and I'd love to discuss it and just get everyone's take. I'll certainly tell you my thoughts, and once I let you know the scenario, just feel free to write in the comments what questions you would be asking. So just this is a bit of an everyone can get on the soapbox here. So put
mm,
your comments in the chat what you would be asking, what your concerns would be, and what you would do in this scenario. Okay, so the scenario is complaints from students are increasing, the trainer turnover is high, the completion rates are declining, but management reports indicate that there are no material compliance concerns. So basically, there's no compliance concerns on the surface, but we're starting to get complaints in. Trainers aren't happy, trainers are leaving, and then the completion rates are dropping. So whilst on paper it's good, beyond that, there are some issues. So
So this is
what?
something that you've actually
Yeah,
seen in real life, Scott.
yeah, yeah. So I've seen it several
many
times. So
times.
what
Mm.
comes to mind when you hear this scenario? What are some of the first questions you would ask?
My initial thoughts is that there's too many silos occurring.
Yeah, well, look, exactly right. But the first question that comes to mind is, are we actually listening to the feedback? So
Yeah.
what are we doing with the feedback? If we're getting, these, several complaints from students, are we just gathering the data and then, that's great. We've got these complaints, we've responded. What are we actually doing with this feedback that we're getting? It could
Mm,
relate to many different things. So I always, when I hear about feedback and what you're doing with feedback, I always, go back to this quote my wife often says to the kids when they complain about not liking dinner and so forth. She always says, feedback is a gift. So,
mm,
feedback is a gift. So, perfect compliance and action. Take on board the feedback, moderate with your team what can be done, and ensure that the students are getting the services that they need. So, you need to look at what actions can take place and what
mm,
actions can be carried out. So, it might be that the completion rates are falling because the assessment materials are no good. So
mm.
maybe they're overcomplicated. That's a common theme that I've seen with many, many RTOs over the years, that the assessment materials are complicated. Students are having to, rely on the trainers too much. If it's online study, the trainer might not always be available when they need them. So, that can cause issues. So one thing
Mm.
can lead to the other. So, you get a complaint, you have a look at something, whether, is it related to assessment? Has there been validation carried out? It might be that you need to conduct a validation activity to try and ensure that things like this are mitigated, that they're limited in the future so future students aren't complaining. So, there's many things that can come out of it. If the
Yeah,
trainers,
Well,
sorry, yeah.
yeah, carry on, Scott.
I
Yeah.
was just going to say, and with a scenario of high trainer turnovers, are we listening to the trainers? So
mm,
if they're providing feedback and telling us that something's not working or this isn't being done right, moderate, listen, have
mm.
meetings, ensure that there's actual active outcomes to these meetings. So don't just do things for the sake of it. Make sure there's going to be some sort of, outcome from this and it informs practice. So
Data doesn't lie, does it? And if
yeah,
the pattern's identified, if there's a high trainer turnover, what's causing that? Is the compliance manager supporting those trainers properly? Have they been provided
yeah,
with the correct tools? Some of the
yeah.
comments have come through, Scott.
Yes. Yeah,
Yep.
let's have a
Yeah.
look at those. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so some people have said like, what's the LLN level of the students? How is support given from management? Alex said head in the sand. We need to review the feedback. Are policies being followed? Because it's all very good to have policies, but if they sit on the shelf, nobody uses them. What's the good of that? Can we schedule a meeting? Too much work for the trainers. But yeah, I think the common thought here is that acting on feedback, 100% feedback is gold. Like whether that's how that's delivered in a really nice
Yeah.
feedback sandwich or really brutally blunt, it's
Yeah.
valuable data for your RTO, 100%.
Yeah. And it can be that, management is out of touch with the operational side of the
Yeah.
business. So
Yeah.
then it comes down to, compliance, is just not hiding documents, but it's, implementing a risk management and continuous improvement system that actually identifies areas for improvement. So it's all about, what improvement can we seek, what have we identified, and how we can move forward. So just because something looks good on paper, it doesn't mean it's a set and forget.
No.
So the students won't care what your marketing policy says if they graduate and they don't feel confident to gain employment with the skills that they have. So student outcomes, they need to be the forefront of everything. And that the LLM point, that is really important as well, because it could be that systems just don't work. I spoke to someone recently and they were a trainer and assessor, and they said that they were having a discussion with a student, and the student just couldn't seem to grasp what was going on, and there was lots of spelling mistakes to the point where the trainer thought like, oh, they're having a laugh. Like, this can't be right. There's no way that this student wouldn't be able to understand this, or these spelling mistakes just seem, beyond comprehension for someone who's, going to be doing this course. And so they had a chat to the student, and the student actually said, look, to be honest, I haven't told this to many people, but I don't know how to read. And
Mm.
so he said, oh, okay, right, right. And went back and had a look. And the LLN came through had the student at quite a high level of LLN, and just thought, how can that be possible? He retested again, and the student obviously was at quite a low LLN level. So something like that would really make you think, well, we need to look at how we're doing this LLM. We need to look at our process of doing this. You know, is it actually capturing what we
Mm.
need? So things like
And
that.
pick that up at the right stage that,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
student supported from day one.
yeah. And so that all that, should be fed back to say like, look, we really need to have a look at this because we've got a student here who basically has a very low level of reading, and we've
Mm.
got them in, a Cert 3, Cert 4 level course.
Mm.
Mm.
Think, like going back to your scenario where you said management reports indicate no material compliance concerns, that's kind of the issue I want to come back to, and in terms of governance as well. I mean, that is, quite troubling if those concerns are not being recognised. And that can sometimes be hard as well, where management doesn't really want to change, isn't interested, and then that sort of comes back to what Ben was saying about having a compliance dash quality culture.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And Nancy's made a comment, don't hesitate to bring some relevant change based on the feedback. And
Mm.
that kind of comes to my next point of being proactive rather than reactive. And if you've got a compliance culture embedded, then, when the person who's getting that feedback, it's not like just, oh, some feedback, file it away, but they're actively bringing solutions to their manager, who is then taking solutions to leadership. So,
Yeah,
yeah, and so that's the next question, Scott, on my list. How can an RTO show that risk management is proactive rather than reactive?
yeah. Okay.
Yes, I
Oh,
think
Sally, yeah.
I was going to
Sally,
answer
I've
that
marked
one.
you to answer that one for me.
Yeah, so basically, as is sort of apparent from the discussions we've had, a proactive approach to risk management means the RTO is not waiting for something to go wrong before it acts. It means leaders are regularly looking ahead, asking where quality could break down, and putting controls in place before these risks impact learners, employers, or compliance outcomes.
Mm,
I mean, it's interesting because Matthew raises on the chat, are the class size numbers manageable for trainers, or class size numbers based on financial restrictions? Generally, if the class numbers are too large, trainers don't have time or logistics to assist students thoroughly. So that's a good example of a proactive approach to risk management, that you already identify that the class size numbers might be too high if you have them at a certain level, and that will always, of course, depend on the industry sector that you're in, because obviously if it's practical
Yeah,
classes like cookery or carpentry, the class sizes for the practical components tend to need to be smaller, whereas perhaps for things like business studies that are more theoretical, say for sort of lecture type format, the class sizes could be bigger. So just back to the proactive approach to risk management is about that the RTO regularly, and this sort of feeds into what Scott was saying as well, regularly reviews trainer currency, assessment validation outcomes, learner feedback, complaints, completion data, student support needs, industry engagement, and third-party arrangements. And if any of those reviews identify early warning signs, such as, for example, repeated assessment errors, delayed learner progress, low engagement, trainer workload concerns, or inconsistent feedback, that the RTO takes action early.
mm. So this sort of brings me to a scenario that I want to address. So let's say an RTO uncovers something that could be identified as like a serious non-compliance at audit, something like an assessment tool, somehow it got skipped and somehow something hasn't been observed, or, it hasn't been met. Um, so the RTO identifies it, they put a plan in place to rectify it, they document it, they correct the issue. Perhaps they, reassess those students, or they worked out a way to fix that. So I know a lot of RTO owners who would be very worried if the regulator found that documentation. But under this quality assurance model, I believe that it's demonstrating good practice and good governance to be able to show to the regulator, or to have that trail to show we have conducted quality self-assurance practices. We've identified this. This is the steps that we took. This is the actions we took in place. We are now compliant, and we've learned a valuable lesson along the way. But I'm going to do good cop, bad cop here, because there are two lenses to consider. One, the regulator takes an educative and consultative approach to the situation, encouraging errors to be found, demonstrating that you are, you know, applying this real life quality assurance in practice. On the flip side, do you want to admit that you had a compliance breach that could potentially cause reputational damage to your RTO if that regulator takes the punitive approach with what you've shared with them? So what do we
Yeah,
do?
okay.
Scott, you
Look,
do good cop. Sally, you do bad cop.
yeah. Okay, so look, to be honest, really, in that scenario, it's self-assurance in action. So it's really identifying that you have, a risk, management mechanism that's working. So you've identified that there's an issue, albeit quite an obvious one if that's happening. So, what you really could look at this down the lens of, you've identified an issue. This is what we're going to do to fix it. If there needs to be remedial action to take place, and maybe that there's some students that would need to go get, reassessed, ensure that you've taken those actions to do so. So maybe send out appropriate letters to those students saying, look, we would like you to, come back and just be reassessed on this. We could have like a conversation, a competency conversation or something like that, or run through an observation with them. Just identifying what you plan on doing to rectify the situation, then rectify it, and then ensure going forward, that this will be addressed appropriately, and then the students will be assessed appropriately going forward. So you'd really be putting your hand up and saying to the regulator, look, we identified this issue. This is what we've done to fix it. And this is us, self-assuring. This is us, putting this in action. And, we're not perfect. We admit that. But we're moving forward. We're going to make sure we're doing a better job and improve. And that's certainly the good cop approach. That's definitely, as I said, self-assurance in action.
Did you ever see any examples of that, Scott, when you were an auditor where issues were flagged on a register, and you sort of had to make a decision about that? Because I must say, for me, I've never seen like really bad issues flagged on a CI register. It's
Yeah,
more
look,
about,
pretty rare.
students said the Wi-Fi wasn't fast enough.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. There's a wobbly table in the lunchroom.
No one likes the snacks in the vending machine.
Yeah. Look, pretty rare, but I have had some, like, people have contacted or emailed in and said, "Oh, look, we've just realized that we've been doing this wrong, for the past 6 months. What should we do?" And you do get those scenarios, but it is rare that people will put their hand up and say, like, "Whoa, hey, we're non-compliant. We just found out." So yeah, look, it is a bit rare that someone would be so outright and admit that to the regulator.
So
That's
Sally,
right.
from the flip side of the lens,
Yes, well,
what's your
well,
opinion?
that's right. Bad cop, and actually, Janet's question in the chat leads well into that. Janet says, "How is it best to record issues and improvements put into place? Do you have a detailed CI register listing all findings and actions, or have a document for each issue?" I'll come to that in a moment. But even before these new standards, I always kind of felt like, oh gosh, when I was working with my clients, if they had some issues, do you put that on a CI register? Because first of all, do you want to highlight that issue to the regulator like we were talking about? And secondly, is say it's a serious issue with an assessment tool that doesn't meet requirements, is that a continuous improvement or is it a compliance breach? So it's a compliance breach. So to put it on a continuous improvement register seems
Yeah, it's a different category, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course, yes, if you highlight that so say in your CI register you put, this assessment tool was found to be significantly non-compliant, which is also an issue in terms of the new standards, because you're supposed to review it before you use it. And so then there's systemic issues being raised there. So say, anyway, you do put it and you say, look, it was found to be significantly non-compliant. and we've fixed the tool now, and that's it. Well, then, the regulator can come along and will go, well, yeah, you did that, but why didn't you go back and reassess all the students? Things like that. So it's a really, really tricky issue. Just to go to Janet's question about the detailed CI register, I don't think it really matters, how you do it. I think the best thing is to do it how it works for the RTO. You could have a CI register that covers different areas, but I think there'd probably be a lot of crossover then, and then you would find that you've got lots of different CI registers. So maybe you could put it in one register, but you could have different, like say it's an Excel sheet, different tabs for different areas, but it's all in one place. But it's really what works. But just going back, Jeff, both the CIR and related scan documents. Yes, that's right. You could have a reference to them. You don't
Yeah, it might be
necessarily have to have
linking
it.
to something
Yeah,
because an issue might have come up because of validation, and then the validation might have then it could be post-assessment validation, and then the validation fed into the continuous improvement register
yeah,
and happened that
yeah,
way. Mm.
yeah. So I think in terms of that issue in general, what we sort of came up with when we were discussing this is that the main issue is that at the end of the day, when the CEO or whoever signs off on the annual declaration comes to do it, is that they are actually signing off truthfully that they believe they're compliant.
So
And
fixing those issues, putting
spread,
in plans in
yeah,
place, and knowing that moving forward you are compliant.
yeah,
Yeah, so look, if the CEO is just, signing off blindly, just assuming that everyone's doing everything correct and, not really being across it, they're putting themselves at risk. Because
mm,
at the end of the day, if there's an audit activity and, what's in the annual declaration, they could come back to that and say, oh, well, you've signed off here saying that you're doing this and, you're, meeting these obligations. They
which
would be
does,
seen as, not fit and proper to
yeah,
run RTO.
exactly.
It's
That's
all
it.
linked,
Comes back,
like the knee
yeah,
bone's connected to the shin bone. So it all,
yeah.
one thing leads to another.
Thought it
Mm.
was the thigh bone, Scott, isn't it?
Yeah, is it? Yeah.
Now you put that song in my head.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what are examples then, or your sort of key examples for risk indicators that the governance bodies, your CEOs, your leadership team should be regularly, can't even speak today, regularly monitoring?
Yeah.
So, obviously, they can't have oversight across every single operation. What are those key areas they should be on top of?
Yeah, key ones would be being informed about, the complaints and appeals that's coming through. And not just the specific, what's in these complaints and appeals, but the number. If,
Mhm.
there's, looking at data, if there's some months, there's a heavy increase in complaints and appeals, want to look as to why that's happening. So looking at the complaints and appeals, assessment validation outcomes. So so many times in the past, I've seen someone just go, yep, we've done assessment validation. That's it. It's done. But what about the outcomes? What are the outcomes from it? What have we learnt from this activity? So you're not just doing activities just for the sake of doing an activity. What's
Mm.
going to be the outcome of this? How is this going to make our, assessment better? What's going to make our delivery better? So looking at
And
things
if
like
and if
that.
9 out of 10 validations show that there were issues, maybe
Yeah.
there's a problem with your tools.
Yeah,
Who's developing
absolutely.
your tools? Where are you getting them from?
Yeah, definitely. Look, risk indicators, audit findings, trainer assessor currency, learner feedback, completion rates, and student progress as well. So, I'd encourage RTO leaders to look for early warning signs. So, if students are falling behind, or if there's repeated requests for extensions, our assessment decisions being turned over, workloads for staff, just things like that. So
Mm.
um, these really, if students aren't progressing, or, they're constantly asking the same questions, it would start to make you think, well, let's have a look at our assessment, like something's going on here, or is the trainer, spread too thin? So
Mm.
a lot of questions can come out of these things. So just keeping an eye on them and using them as indicators for how you can, govern the organization better. So,
Yeah.
just consistency as well. So are the industry engagement records consistent, or, are people saying the same things? Are we collecting the right data? Is the right metrics there? So industry engagement, that's another thing where, you want to be asking the right questions. You don't want to just it to become, some sort of a
The
pick
box
and flick
ticking.
type
Yeah.
exercise. You want it to be beneficial. You want to do it. If you're talking to these people, you want to be ensuring that you're getting the best out of them, asking them the right questions because
Mm.
your RTO, you're going to be sending the students out there in the workplace. As an RTO, you should be confident that when your student leaves, graduates, that they would be, have the right skills and knowledge to be able to do that job that they want to do. So that's
Yeah.
that's at the end of the day, you really want to have that confidence that when someone graduates, yep,
You
of
you want you want industry wanting your graduates.
yeah, yeah, absolutely,
So
definitely.
issues, I'm just aware of the time. That 40 minutes
Got
went
Right.
a
past. We've got
we've got
four
a
minutes to
question,
go.
but maybe
We'll leave
we'll
that one
leave
till
that.
the end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so in a few minutes we'll duck back to that one. Yep.
Yeah. So issues in a business shouldn't be viewed in isolation. I like the term that you use, governance signal. I think that's a really good phrase that will stick with me. It demonstrates that leaders need to know what's happening in all of those areas because otherwise they might be considered as separate issues or silos, and then the root cause is not being, identified, and then it can't be addressed or the correct treatment applied. So we sort of we've sort of answered the question. My next question was,
Yeah.
how do you avoid treating continuous improvement as a register only, more as a quality improvement process? But I suppose,
Yeah.
Scott, just 30 seconds on how you
Yep.
can do that.
Absolutely. So, look, the whole point of it is learning from past practices, identifying the areas from improvement and, informing future processes and actions to build stronger capability. So, when I worked as an auditor, identifying non-compliance, you'd often see, the CEO or compliance manager, looking like quite despondent, that like it becomes their baby, like they don't want to be told, that something's not right. But I would say to them, like, look, this isn't a chance. This isn't identifying areas for improvement. So this is how
Mhm.
you can be better. You can provide a better service, get a better outcomes for your students and also your business. So don't see it as a bad thing, like, oh no, we're
Mm.
non-compliant, we've done something wrong. If you've identified something that can be done better, it's great for all involved. So
Lesson.
business and students. Yeah. So having a register for the sake of it is pointless. You've got to be taking actions.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so my sort of final comment ties in nicely what we were talking about earlier is that compliance obligations need to be embedded into business as usual operations, not someone's job, not that's that person's job, that's the compliance manager's job or the department's job. It's not a separate activity, it is a culture. So Sally, maybe you could just give us a few words about how to embed that in the culture of the operations.
Yeah, and again, we feed back into what Ben was saying, but basically, that's right. RTOs need to design compliance and quality into everyday systems and routines, and that means compliance obligations are built into role descriptions, built into staff induction, trainer meetings, validation schedules, student support processes, enrollment checks, complaint handling, industry engagement, reporting cycles and leadership activities. So the whole gamut, it's not a separate activity that happens just before an audit. So an example is, say if trainers are reviewing learning progress and it's not going so well, that should be feeding into risk management and continuous improvement. If student feedback identifies confusions or delays, that should trigger action through the normal quality system. And if validation identifies an issue, it shouldn't just be recorded, it should actually lead to changes in tools, staff support, moderation, monitoring, and so on. Yeah, so the practical ways to embed compliance and quality, make sure it's visible in everyday decision making, and encourage a compliance and quality culture across the entire RTO.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there is no point. I'm just gonna because we're at time, so we'll go to questions. But I'm just gonna steal what you said earlier, Scott,
Yeah.
when we were having a meeting about this, is that there's never a point when you can say we're compliant. doesn't, we
Yes.
can stop doing it. We're compliant. It's ongoing. So it's a constant evolution, adaptation, it's moving all the time. It's a constant cycle that
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about it before, Brooke, and I know I'm cutting you off here, but it was like, say, an athlete, for example, like Roger Federer,
yeah,
when he
I'm
just
fit.
when he won his first title, do you think he just said, "All right,
Yeah,
cool, I'm
I'm
great at
fit
tennis.
now.
I don't need to train anymore." You got to
Yeah.
keep on training. He wants to win more titles, so you got to keep on moving. It's constantly moving, keeping up with the times, evolving. Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't just
100%.
get to a point and you're like, "Yep, we're done."
Yeah. And Sally, if we could just get the final word from you on governance reporting cycles, what you recommend there.
Yeah, so senior leaders should have a regular governance reporting cycle, and that could be monthly or quarterly, depending on the size and complexity of the RTO. And it should force leaders to look at the information and ask, what is this telling us about quality, risk, and learner outcomes? Tools don't need to be complicated. It can be a simple dashboard, a well-used action register, minutes that show decisions, and evidence that actions have been followed through can also be really powerful,
Yeah.
which sort of feeds into one of the questions we've got there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Sally and Scott. That's time on the 45 minutes. So we are going to open up the audience discussion in the chat. So pop, Nicolette says, unless I win the lottery, and then I will actually say, sorry, I'm done. Yes, I feel like that when I play the Powerball. But yeah, so we'll pop those questions in the chat. We are in the final days as well of our end of financial year sale of resources online. So head over to our shop if you do need policies, procedures, packs, learning and assessment kits. Um, that ends 30th of June. Also get in touch with our hello@rtoworks.com.au if you want to book Sally, Scott, or me in for a discussion or, a chat about compliance. A reminder before we wrap up, you will get a certificate of attendance sent to you via email. Please be patient. I think Ben gets them to us, to you usually the next day. I do want to ask you all a favor, and Ben, maybe you could pop the link in the chat or send it in an email afterwards. Please give us a Google review. I never ask for them. I'm always being told I need to ask for them. Someone will put the link. It's at the bottom of everybody's email signatures. But if we could please have a Google review, if you're enjoying our webinars, that would be wonderful. My goal is to get 5, so that would be great from what we have already. And we will have another webinar next month. The details will be sent out soon. But now let's go to the chat. And if you do drop off before the chat's finished, thank you for coming along. We really appreciate you guys. So Sally, do you want to pick a couple
Yeah.
of questions in the chat?
Yeah, so the first one I'm just looking at that we haven't addressed because we've addressed all the other chat ones was from Annette, who said, may I ask what are some key areas that the warning signs have been with third-party partners? I guess it depends what the third-party partner is for, but I suppose one of the key warning signs would be that the agreement is not being followed through. Things that are specified in the agreement aren't happening. And that's why it's really important to have a really tight third party agreement. And I suppose a warning sign, I'm just saying these points generally, is that no monitoring is being done, especially if the third party is around the third party performing training and assessment for you. The monitoring needs to be pretty regular.
Mm.
Um,
There's a question from Prakash. Is it compliant to use the exact performance criteria text directly as student tasks while developing the assessment? Once again, with compliance, there's no right or wrong way to do it, but does the student understand what that means? Often it's written in jargon, it's in technical language. You know, it's better to really unpack that and turn it into something really user friendly for the student. So there's not really like a right or wrong answer to that. And again, I'll just answer Lisa Teasel's comment about industry engagement. Should there be a register or can we have evidence behind every qualification to demonstrate this specific engagement and the outcomes from it? Is there a right way? Once again, it depends how you want to show it. And it would inform your TAS and your course delivery, but you might have a register, you might have use that to compile all of your notes from all of your surveys and your meetings or your business breakfasts you've had. Or you might have done it in another way. You might have built that into your TAS documents, or your TAS might refer to your register. So, Sally, are you on the same page there?
Yeah, I think industry consultation registers are really good because they document who you had the consultation with, how you did it, what date. It summarizes what you found out, and then you can also have a column that says actions and basically this is what we're going to do, and you can have a completion column as well. So I find the register for industry consultation to be a really good way. You don't have to, like you say, Brooke. But and so for example, Vasantha said, how can improvements be monitored and evaluated for effectiveness? So that would be, say, if you did have a register, you go back and you look at what you've done, and then you have a look at that, was that really the best way to do it? I suppose that monitoring and evaluation probably best done through meetings, I would say,
Mm.
to
Yeah.
look at the actions that have been taken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Matthew says would be interested to see how others manage plagiarism with assessments being uploaded to sites like Course Hero. Matthew, I'd really encourage you to watch our webinar that we did on AI and student assessment risks, realities, and practical responses. Maybe admin can pop that in the chat, but we did discuss AI plagiarism, and then obviously before that it was Google answered copied answers or Course Hero and things like that. So you might find some nuggets of information in that prior webinar to go
Yeah, and
through.
they're all on YouTube as well.
Mm.
So not a question, but I just think this one just is a great comment from Ben Poppy. I think it's important to note that compliance is more than just a role; it's a culture. A
Mm.
culture of quality is much easier to manage than a person's role. It's so true. That really is a great point. Sally, you've said that as well, but I think that's so important to know. And when everyone has a bit of buy-in to, the compliance and how everything's running, it just creates that fantastic culture. And it's really is good leadership, is success through others. So
Mm.
it's not yourself, achieving things and doing this. It's the people who are working in the teams around you. So people having success in their own roles, that's fantastic leadership. So
Mm.
that's really good. Compliance culture, love it.
100%. I'm always banging on about this, I know, but if we all have this growth mindset and we encourage our teams to have this growth mindset rather than this fixed mindset, then, we can really encourage everybody to view feedback as a positive. And it's like,
Mm.
oh, that's great. I never would have picked that up, or I never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
Now we can do this. And that's part of that culture, isn't it? Of just looking for ways to improve, rather than feeling like we've done something wrong or we've made a mistake. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
Mohammed says, for small RTOs where the CEO or senior manager wears multiple hats, what practical governance structure would you recommend to ensure proper oversight, accountability, and separation of responsibilities? In particular, how should a small RTO conduct and document regular compliance reporting, management updates, risk reviews, and governance meetings without creating an overly complex admin burden? Scott, any ideas? That's a kind of
Um,
big topic there, isn't it?
yeah.
I suppose, like something that I think is really good is to have a compliance schedule where you do sort of bite-size compliance activities every month, and you write up the results of that. Obviously, it depends on the small RTO's budget, but bringing in a external person to have a look at things as well. Yeah, you've got to keep the you don't want onerous
Mm.
structures.
Yeah, because you don't want it to be over complex and becoming a bit of a burden because then I think you really do lose, lose sight of what you're actually doing these activities for. So the compliance schedule and like, month by month doing things in bite-sized pieces. So one month we might look at, looking at like, student feedback, one month we might look, looking at some validation outcomes and things like that, and just making like a constant thing over the next 12 months rolling on looking at different things.
And
Mm.
that's
Yeah.
what we do with our retainer clients, isn't it, Scott? We develop that
Yeah.
compliance calendar.
Schedule. Mm.
And we've got a question how to maintain a standard annual governance calendar. So I kind of, I was saying to someone yesterday, that compliance schedule isn't a static document either. Like, for example, say I look at something 1 month and I think, oh, right, based on that, I need to do such and such. Then I'll go back to that document and update it. And then, I might put things into my CI register, or I might record it in a meeting minute. So you just all that clear sort of actions, outcomes, and status completion.
Mm. Charlie asks, are all the resources in a program required to be industry consulted? Charlie, no, not every single resource. It's more that you've done that industry consultation at the level of the qualification and you've had feedback around what you're
Yeah,
doing, how you're doing it. It's not that all your training and assessment resources need to be
yeah. And
verified.
And industry stakeholders, they're quite technical, those documents, so they're often not. It's better probably to just like maybe show them, but just say, look, this is about this. What do you think of that? Do you think that's a good way of teaching? But yeah, just like Brooke says, focus on the at the qualification level.
Yeah, some of the units you might want to share the resources for the way that you're doing certain things, or are these programs the right programs that industry is using now? Have we, like, is the software correct? It's certain parts of it, but it's not like they have to quality review all of your resources.
And
Um,
Lisa says she found forms for new RTOs to check compliance, and she's using these to demonstrate they are compliant and review what we need to do, solve any possible risk that could arise. Yeah, so checklist is another great idea.
Mm. I'd just like to say to everyone, thank you for all of your lovely comments. I've just been reading the chat and we really like Giselle says, thank you, RTO Works, you are amazing. People are giving us lovely claps and thank yous and for the valuable sessions. We really appreciate you guys coming to these sessions. And I actually did a reflection for an academic essay that I had to complete for the degree that I'm doing. And I wrote a reflection that I get as much out of these webinars for
Mm,
my own
yeah,
professional development and improvement as I think the audience does.
yeah,
So this is such a good
yeah.
collaborative space, and we really appreciate you all being here with
Yeah.
us.